Hey everyone, welcome back into our home as we continue this discussion on being together on mission. And we have gone through the flow of purpose to values and now to the skills. And what we've been saying is the purpose is where we align our lives to the mission of Jesus. Our values are what serve as our guide. Once we're aligned, we need a guide to keep us almost like guardrails. They keep us on the path. But really, we're talking about the skills. What do we actually do? What are our habits? What does it look like to live together on mission? And in the last lesson, we talked about three of those skills, and we're going to get in to the other three now.
So hopefully with your homework, you were able to look at those first three skills that are your planned routines and your planned rhythms. And you were able to not only look through those exercises, but look back to that assessment to kind of let that inform where you had some areas that you could start with and really start to build a couple of tangible, accessible, doable rhythms for your home and for your household that you can start to apply. If you haven't finished that or you're still kind of working through that, keep pushing through and find something that you can start with before you move on to these next skills.
Yeah, and those six skills, again, if we categorize them, the B1 skills and make one skills, or maybe you think about them as the B1 skills are the ones that help us grow, and the make one skills are those that help us go with Jesus. The key words that we want to drive home are the ones that we just looked at in that former lesson were the ones that are planned, the routine habits, and they draw us inward. And those were speak your purpose, know the word, and then lift your heart. Now, the three that we're going to get into on this session are those that are intentional habits. So they may have a plan in the sense of we're going places or around certain people, but really it's not a plan, is it? When I'm intentional, I'm thinking about I want to walk in this rhythm and see what God provides. And so the skills there are invest in the one, live in community, and share the message. And the thing that those three have in common are those are definitely relational. When we're relational in our walk with Jesus, whether it's with seekers or with other followers, really we're responding to what God provides in our lives with intention, with intentionality. Let's look at a passage and talk about this a little bit more here from a scripture perspective. Colossians chapter 4, verses 2 through 6. And we're going to see here that Jesus designed us to be intentional in the way we move outward as we go with him.
Colossians 4 says, "Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us, that God may open to us a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of your time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person."
Yeah, I love this text because it has all six skills in there. We see that through the life of Jesus. We see him practicing these skills, and we are to imitate him and then, of course, invite him to give us the strength to follow him. We don't just simply look at him as someone as an example. We do that, but we also say, will you help me? Help me become who you designed me to be. And as we live together on mission, we're saying, will you help our home, Lord Jesus, to be what you've designed us to be? And we see here in this text, as they all come together, how they empty out. You see the purpose that Paul speaks from. He says in verse 3 there that he's saying that he wants the Lord to open up a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I'm in prison, that he may do what he ought to do, and that is to speak. So he has this purpose within him that he wants to speak with. Then we see him talking about the word, of course, that God would open up a door for the word. And if you're going to have a door opened up for the word, you've got to know the word, right? And so we've practiced that skill. We also see him talking about prayer. Here he says, continue steadfastly in prayer. And that would be the way we lift our hearts to God, and we're working together on mission in prayer. But then now we see these make one skills come alive. And the idea of investing in the one is we're looking for those that we can share the message with. But before we do that, we have to have an intentional walk. So I want you to look closer at verse 5. It says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders. Now, that word there, outsiders, that points to someone who doesn't know Christ yet, is not a follower of Jesus yet. But the word there, walk in wisdom, is intentionality. You've thought it through. You've thought about how we walk, how we move into the rhythms of our life. And so in a moment, Nicole's going to talk through about how we have thought about that in our own household. But real quickly, I want to show you the other two skills here. We see living in community in the sense that this is done not by ourselves. I don't know if you've noticed, like in the scriptures, a lot of times I will think that's speaking to me, and it is, but really it's an us, isn't it? He says, continue steadfastly in prayer. He's talking to a group of people, to the church. And then he says, later, he says that we are in this together. We're doing this together. He says that pray also for us. Paul doesn't even say me. He says pray also for us. So this is a team thing, living in community. And then finally, of course, he asked that they would pray so that God would open up a door. And then when that happens, their speech would be seasoned with salt, gracious, and they would know how to answer each person. And that is sharing the message.
So for us, for investing in the mission, that's really been about honestly taking the pieces of our own personal purpose statements and who we are and where we naturally fit with our gifting, our values as a household, and then looking around in our sphere and saying, where is that for us? Considering those things. So for our family, we're very campus oriented. We have always focused our mission on college campuses and student culture, and then in specific places within our community, depending on the season of our life. So that's a place where we can step in and start to utilize some intentionality and who we're connecting with and who we're moving toward.
Yeah, in fact, we've even made strategic decisions about our work based on that. I have been a campus minister vocationally, but not always. We actually thought about, well, what if we teach on campus? What if we coach on campus? And that's been some ways that we connect.
The next one, living in community, is simply being intentional about making sure that you have that community in your life. You have people that you can give and take with, that you can share life with. Sometimes that takes some effort. For us, we've been in and out of formal ministry for 22 years. And sometimes when you're in that, you have so much interaction and engagement and socialization with other people all the time when you're in ministry, but you don't actually have community necessarily. So we've had to learn the hard way sometimes that we have to be intentional about creating spaces and relationships that are connective and very communal in a give and take kind of way. So for us, that's oftentimes been community groups or small groups where we have a set group of people that we see on a consistent basis, and we meet in homes and we share food so that we can actually have relationship.
Yeah, community groups is a great way we like to say it in our training, and that might be something that as you look into the exercises later, you'll see some patterns that would be helpful for you, and we'll point you to some resources of how we have experienced that and how it can work best.
And the last is to share. And I think for us, a big piece of that is being mindful and purposeful about keeping the doors of our home open. So when we make connections in our community group and then extensive out of that, or when we make connections in our mission field on campus or in the places that we are being intentional about going to, we have a space in our home for them to come in, and we can share life with them. We can share meals with them. We can pray with them or pray for them. And that's all a part of the culture of our household. But opening up our doors is a big piece to that, being not just being hospitable, but opening up life to other people and welcoming them into our life.
So I guess maybe a final thought that we want to leave you with is the fact that text says that you would live in such a way that you would invite questions. And where I get that is it says in verse 6, it says, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. You give answers to someone who's asked questions. So a good question that we ask ourselves is, how are we living in the sense of following Jesus that would invite people to ask questions? For instance, how did you guys get that way as far as your children, and your family, and why does it work that way? Well, first of all, they've got to see us in our lives, and we've got to invite them into our lives. But two, we need to be intentional and planned before we are maybe in front of those people, or we're in spaces that we're not always in front of them. It's the planned habits and routines that we're working together to grow in. And again, I don't want to give any picture that's not real or is fake, that we're perfect or anyone else is perfect, or you have to have a perfect routine. But really, isn't that the goal, is that we're doing our best to share Jesus with others? And the only way we're going to do that is we've got to go. We've got to be intentional. We've got to live authentically in front of others and with others. So we're hoping that these exercises are going to be helpful as you dig back into those. Doesn't matter where you are. If you don't feel like you have any of these habits or routines and you don't even know where to start, that's okay. That's what the exercises are for. So you grab the guide, go through those exercises. You're going to see those 3 make one skills, and they're going to do like the last lesson. They're going to help you think through the routines, the habits that you can create to practice those skills intentionally. And we'll come back on that next lesson as we wrap things up to finish our discussion on living together on mission.